This isn't just history, it's the story of a people who never surrendered their identity. This is Wales, and I am Iftikhar. Let's begin now.
And seriously, you have to ask, why? I mean, this quote from our source material just nails it. The country has a freaking dragon on its flag. How on earth do you just gloss over that? It's a huge blind spot in the way we tell this history, and that's exactly what we're here to fix.
Because here's the thing you got to understand. The story of Wales is a story of survival. We're talking about an incredible, honestly improbable cultural survival. For 2,000 years, against just overwhelming odds, this unique Celtic identity has held on. So the big question is, how? How in the world did they pull that off?
All right, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to go way back, all the way back to the beginning. We're talking about the Celtic roots of Welsh culture and their very first run-in with a massive, world-changing empire.
And this leads us to a really fascinating historical puzzle. We know for a fact that Celtic culture is the foundation of everything that would become Wales. But how did it even get to Britain to begin with? It turns out historians have a couple of different theories on this.
Okay, so on one hand, you have the standard migration model. Pretty straightforward. A whole bunch of Celtic people moved into Britain. But then there's this other idea, and it's super interesting. They call it the meme model. The idea here is that Celtic culture itself, the language, that cool swirly art, the myths, it was just so awesome that the local Britons just adopted it. Not through a massive invasion, but through trade and contact. Basically, the culture went viral long before the internet.
All right, so after the Celts, the next big players on the scene are the Romans. And yeah, they were a little more forceful. They came in and conquered a huge chunk of Britain. But, and this is key, their influence out in the west, in that rugged, hilly land that would eventually become Wales, it was surprisingly light. The Celtic culture and language there stayed pretty much intact, creating this little pocket of old Britain. But you know, the most important thing the Romans did was leave. Because when they packed up and went home, it kicked off a total free-for-all that would forge a brand new identity in the west.
So, when the Romans bailed in the 5th century, they left this giant power vacuum, and what followed was, well, chaos. It was this wild era of migration that completely redrew the map of the island and started to shape the very idea of Wales. It was like a massive game of musical chairs, but with entire peoples. You had Germanic tribes, the Angles and the Saxons, pouring into the east, and the native Romano-Britons, they basically got squeezed, pushed further and further west. And over a couple of hundred years, their Celtic culture ended up getting concentrated in that far western peninsula, the area we now call Wales and Cornwall.
And get this, you can see the whole cultural divide just by looking at the names. The name the English gave them, Wales, actually comes from an old Germanic word, walha, which means foreigner. But the name the Welsh called their own country, Cymru, and that comes from a Celtic word for countrymen. I mean, it's right there in the language, a clear line in the sand, us versus.
So this new, isolated Celtic identity was really flourishing, culturally speaking. But politically, well, it was a bit of a mess, totally fragmented. And as we head into the medieval period, a very powerful new neighbor starts looking their way.
For centuries, Wales was basically this patchwork of little kingdoms, all run by local princes who were always fighting with each other. And honestly, it was that constant infighting that made them so vulnerable. Especially after 1066, when the Normans conquered England, got organized, and brought a seriously powerful army right up to their doorstep.
But conquering Wales? That wasn't going to be a one-and-done deal like the Battle of Hastings. No way. There was no single Welsh king to defeat. Instead, the Normans had to take down dozens of these little principalities, one by one. It was a long, slow, grinding process that literally took centuries.
So how did they hold on to the land they took? One word, castles. And I mean, so many castles. The Normans and the English built over 600 of them in Wales. That gives Wales the highest density of castles of any country in Europe. Just think about that number for a second.
Yeah, our source material just says it perfectly. That is a stupid amount of castles. And you know what? That bluntness really gets to the point. This wasn't just a war. It was a massive project of permanent occupation, designed to just pin down the Welsh people under tons of stone and mortar.
So, this path from conquest to full-on union took a long time. First, you have King Edward I finishing the military conquest in 1283. Then, in the early 1400s, one last big Welsh uprising gets crushed, and it really looks like Welsh independence is just gone. But then, and this is a wild plot twist, a guy with Welsh roots, Henry Tudor, actually becomes the King of England. And it's his son, Henry VIII, who finally makes it official, formally integrating Wales and England with new laws in the mid-1500s.
Okay, so at this point, Wales is officially, politically, part of the bigger English story. And you'd think, well, that's it then. The unique culture is finally going to fade away. But you would be wrong, so wrong, because now we enter the modern era and a whole new chapter of survival and revival kicks off.
Since the political fight was over, the battle for survival had to change arenas. It moved off the battlefield and into people's homes, into books, into songs. The Welsh language itself, with its ancient poetry and stories, became the main carrier of the national identity. Being Welsh meant speaking Welsh. But man, that identity was under serious threat. The Industrial Revolution completely transformed South Wales, turning it into a hub of heavy industry which brought huge social upheaval. And even worse, there were actual government policies in schools and in workplaces that actively punished people for speaking Welsh. It was really bad, and the number of speakers started to plummet.
So by the early 1900s, the language was in a really steep decline. It pretty much hit rock bottom. But, and this is the amazing part of the story, it didn't end there. A massive, coordinated effort began to turn things around, and it sparked this incredible recovery that's still going on today.
And you can totally see the results of this revival in some huge political and cultural wins in the 20th century. After World War II, this powerful movement for more autonomy really took off. Then you get the Welsh Language Acts, which gave Welsh the same legal status as English. They lost Welsh language TV and radio stations. And the big one, in 1999, Wales finally got its own national parliament.